Hey, everybody. It's been a while, and I'm excited to say that Barbara has joined us again, and we're just going to have a time of conversation. No limit on time. So if you don't have a lot of time to listen to this, maybe you'll come back to it. So, Barbara, I just want to thank you for being with us and speaking to whoever's willing to hear and allowing us to just talk with you with no agenda and no preset questions or itinerary. I love that. It's very organic and it's very authentic. So, Barbara Symons, I just wanted to mention this before we get started into conversation because I always forget it when we talk. Barbara Symons is best-selling author of Escaping Christianity, Finding Christ, which can be found on Amazon, as well as Musings from an Ex-Christian Fundamentalist. And Barbara is very active on Facebook, which is where a friend of mine connected me with her. And I remember writing you a question in your private message box, and you wrote me back right away. And then I realized that you write everybody back as best as you can.
Best as I can.
Yeah, so you really make that personal connection with as many people as you are able to. And I just love that, how you serve the community in that way and just very authentic and allow people to talk with you and ask you things and you can just talk about anything. And that is very Aquarian. And I'll probably mix a lot of astrology in this conversation. It just flows out of me. But I just want to make mention that we are moving from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. And Aquarian is about the collective consciousness. It is about the people taking back their power. It is about the higher mind. It is about the nervous system. It's about AI. You could study this in astrology, but I just wanted to say that in context of all of this connection we're making online, in social media and in, through our phones and through all these connections we're making is very, very Aquarian. That's why it's happening. It's a confirmation of the times that we're in. And a lot of people tend to criticize that, but that's where we are as a collective. And it is helping us grow and advance and open up, to where we are. And so you've been so instrumental as a role, in my opinion, to so many and humbly. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank you openly and publicly for that.
Thank you. That's very kind.
We were just mentioning before we got on and talking about how we're doing, and you were saying to me that you're in one of the biggest shifts, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you want to just talk about that a little bit, just in general.
Yeah, you had asked me, what was new. We were touching base just a little bit and nothing earth shattering for me, but as far as things that are changing, I am really feeling, sensing, watching myself change. And, if you want to talk in terms of how you would react to things, I really sense a maturing, a grounding, just a real steadying force in my behavior. A lot of times in the past, I would really, have knee-jerk responses to things and really be led a lot by my emotional heart. And I just feel and sense a real, it's almost like I have this, and I forget how you phrased it in the Aquarian age, but it's almost like I have this older sister or older wise sage that before I would hear from every now and then.
Right.
It's like now, like the hand is on my shoulder and my ego is so willing to listen and to learn rather than to sit on the throne, so to speak. And so I really, and I also feel like I'm a, you know, a little bit of a forerunner. So when it happens to me, I know that that's what's coming down the pike for the collective. I know
Yes.
I tend to you know, forerun a lot of weird things in consciousness, and then I write about them in hopes to help other people. Um, you know, so just my goodness, in the last 30 years, I've been through a lot and seen a lot of changes personally and in consciousness. And so I really feel like what's coming is really exciting. Um, but it's also invokes a lot of peace and confidence. And a lot of times when I say, you know, this older sage with their hand on my shoulder, I feel so calm,
Mm.
and it's just a lot more wisdom than what Barb is used to and what Barbara's used to, you know, working with. It just feels like something has been opened and I have access to way more than what I did. And so I think that other people, if they pay attention to what's going on with them personally, they'll see some of these changes as well. And yeah, I guess it's just part of the maturing process. And again, like I said, I was such a slow learner for so long. But I feel like I'm finally beginning to mature a little bit.
Wow. I feel like I could cry right now.
Mm,
I'm receiving all of that into my being. And I just relate in my own personal intentions and prayers to the things you're talking about.
mm,
Um, we know that the epochs move in reverse. So we've come out of the Piscean age and we're moving into the Aquarian age. And then the years move forward. So we've moved from a lot of Capricornian structures and systems into now Aquarius. And Capricorn is all about, it's the 10th house and it's all about maturity. And as those major planets have moved out, that should be a sign of the fruit, is the maturity that you're talking about. Um, Capricorn can be very competitive, you know, it's very tenacious, but it can be very competitive. But the higher octave of Capricorn is being able to climb that mountain of maturity, literally. So you're speaking everything that is being shown to us through the cosmos in that
mm,
regard. And so now we move into, Pluto is moving into Aquarius. And as we are moving into the age of Aquarius, out of the Piscean age. So much Aquarian going on. And I have, centrally, we know each other through leaving fundamental Christianity. And I know that you've come out of that system now, it's decades. And yet you are, as you forerun and you pioneer that, you also, reach your hand and you're saying, come on, you guys, it's okay. This is your path. You're not going to do it wrong. And it's comforting to know that you're not just running on ahead without, you're a bridge. And you've talked about that. And you even gave us like a miraculous story about, the bridge and the gap, bridging the gap.
mhm,
And as we go on our YouTube and different things on social media and the algos find us, the algorithms find us, I am now more constantly finding myself stumbling over this person that left this major ministry and this person that grew up under that ministry. And I didn't realize there were droves, there's a tsunami of
mm,
souls leaving this system more
mm,
than I had ever thought.
mhm,
And it's the numbers are just I think almost probably, in my opinion, it looks like the numbers are greater that have left than are still there,
Mm,
possibly.
mhm,
And so we know this is, nothing can stop it. It's happening. I think we're in that phase of transition, not just in this, but in the world. We can see the financial system in a tremendous transition. I would say right now we're in the gap of transition.
mm,
Um, so I want to speak a little bit because I know I personally am going through that transition where I have seen just one friend after another, after another, after another, after another. I mean, it just, I don't know if I have, I probably have two friends that
mm,
remain from my life. Um, that we're so close for my whole life. And just even this week, I was trying to connect with somebody and it was like nothing back. And just
mhm,
someone I never thought, would not would cut me off. And I'm just saying that because I was wondering if we could speak a little bit about that dynamic, because I know there are so many going through it and they're still feeling the emotion. Maybe perhaps we haven't moved through to that mature place of being able to process the loss of relationships and saying goodbye and realizing that was for a time, it was for a season, and we can let it go.
mhm,
Um, and what tied us together and how we see that dissolving. Piscean is about dissolve. It's the 12th house where everything dissolves. It actually dies. It lets go. And we are moving out of that Piscean age. But I believe there is a remnant coming with us from that age. And I know you talk about this a lot with a lot of people, but I was just wondering if we could speak to that, because so many people have come to me and said, "I know you've been hurt in the church." This is what they keep thinking, that it's that I left Christianity because I was hurt in the church.
mhm. Yeah, it's interesting because they don't know how to rationalize that. So they categorize it and put it into that place. And yes, we have been hurt. But they can't fathom yet somebody leaving this sphere of influence just willingly and staying away. They get something out of it. The incredible payback within Christianity is substantial. You get relationship, you get approval, um, you get friends, get pats on the back. I mean, there's just incredible validation.
Yes.
It truly is like a sustaining system that feeds the ego, that feeds your sense of self, your sense of belonging. Um, and Lynn McTaggart wrote a book called The Bond, and she says that the most fundamental issue in a human being is to belong.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
and I can remember people talking about other people within the church system and feeling like, I don't want to leave and have other people talk about me like that.
Right.
And so it's self-sustaining in the effect that it feeds your ego and it keeps you in a place of calm and peace. And when somebody leaves, it puts your sense of peace in jeopardy. It makes you feel insecure. I often say that, Christians need consensus to feel safe, to feel validated, to feel like they belong. And without consensus, there's at least for my experience, initially, there was very little peace. And I still felt the need to proselytize people, because
Hmm.
that's what we're programmed to do. You
Right.
need to preach the gospel. And so back then, when my understanding of what the gospel was begin to change, I felt like I needed to bring people with me because
Yeah.
that's was the Christian MO.
Mm.
whole life. It was just, talking about the good news of the gospel and talking about who got a prophetic word and how that prophetic word came to pass and what this pastor did and how this person got saved. And, it's just continually validating and upgrading the system. And so when you leave, there is a key word that I feel is so important to understand, and that word is resonance.
Mm.
Because when we leave the system, we are no longer vibrating at the same level as what we were in the church. Not saying higher, not saying lower, not saying better, not saying worse, but it's different.
Different.
And so discordant, dissonance,
Mm.
disharmony is the result. And so people organically and naturally are going to turn away from you because you're this beacon that says, look at this, but think of it this way and look at it symbolically and look at this metaphor. So we're doing all these things, but at the end of the day, where they are is perfect for them.
Mm.
And so it's like now I've come to that place, and it, but I'm coming to the place where I understand that where they are is perfect. Now, I may write on Facebook, and some people will say to me, well, geez, you should be over that by now, or don't you understand, blah, blah, blah. And, you just need to love. And so, I mean, they try to give me all these wonderful, bits and pieces of advice, and I appreciate them. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
See, I also know what my role is
Mm-hmm.
as a forerunner. And I really do. I mean, I look at my memories on Facebook. I see what I posted last year and the years prior. I see what I feel today. Will that help? And a lot of times I'll just repost something that was even from 8 years ago. And maybe I don't even feel that way anymore, but somebody needs to hear it. I do feel like I am effective enough to listen to that guidance and to give what I feel people need in that hour, because there's a lot of things that I'm just not there anymore.
I know. I can sense that.
There are still so many that are, and that are looking in this new path of trying to migrate out of severe programming,
Yes.
brainwashing, and my God, they are fearless for leaving in this day, because I'm telling you, it can be brutal out there, not just, personally, but relationally and spiritually. I mean, it can be very, very hard
Yeah.
to go through. So
Especially.
I want to hear, and I want to give what I feel is needed and necessary. It's like you can, a forerunner such as yourself, there's a point to where you can rise above the present timing, and you can step above time, and you can traverse back and forward
Yeah.
and see, where somebody is and be able to give them what they need in
Yeah.
that hour,
That's right.
and so that's one thing. But just to say this, I'm also learning. I was just telling a friend of mine, before we jumped on Zoom, I can remember back in the day when I first moved to College Station, and this is an incredibly conservative community, Christian fundamentalist. I really don't belong here, but But back in the day, that's where I was. And I had a locksmith come and change the locks on the house that we had just purchased. And he came in the house and he was working on the doors and he said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Well, sure." He said, "Are you a Christian or aren't you?" And I said, "Well, of
Oh,
course I am." And he said, "Well, then why do you have a jack-o'-lantern in your front yard?"
oh God.
Halloween. I was like, "What's wrong with that? Don't you know that's how demons get into your house?" And I mean, he chastised me and all of this. And my gosh, when he left, I went out and dumped the leaves out of this big hefty bag, that had this jack-o'-lantern painted on the front of it and dumped it out in the ditch and threw the stuff away because I so wanted to fit in.
Mm,
So wanted to belong. I so wanted to have the approval of others that I lost my voice.
mm,
I lost my voice for a long time where it's like your critical thinking and your need to belong and to be accepted really gets pushed way back and you begin to acquiesce to what other people want and think.
mm. I
But
think one of the words you just said is a curse word. It's a trigger word in fundamentalism, which is critical thinking, or at least where I came from, you didn't critically think because you could get in trouble if you did. Intelligence is not smart. You have to just go with the Bible.
yeah, correct. And so one of the other things that is coming to me in this age, people say, "Oh, you have so much grace when you talk to people and you're so kind." Well, ask the guy 2 days ago that I called an idiot. You know, I just said, if that is what you got out of this post, you're an idiot. And I felt no remorse whatsoever saying it because I have my voice back. And I am not, and what he wrote was inflammatory and untrue. I am not going to be abused by
Mm,
any,
mm,
and I will call
mm,
it like I see it. And so, yes, I want to be kind. Yes, I want to be loving, but I will not be abused. And I also think that's a trait of maturing and finding your place in the world and not allowing somebody else to mess around in your mess kit.
I see that happening.
This is my consciousness. And
Hmm.
I want to honor who this woman is. I want to be able to say, you know what? Like the older, wise sage with their hand on my shoulder to say, you know what? It's okay to say, stop that,
Mm, hmm.
out of line. What you're saying is not true.
Hmm.
So often these people that are confrontive on Facebook, they want to argue and they want to tear you down and roll around in the mud. And I am not going to do that with my energy.
Hmm.
I have worked too hard to bring it where it is. And it's okay to speak and to say the truth. You know what?
Yeah. Well, I think too, part of those Capricornian energies that are passing are the pedestals of the systems of this world. And I also see pedestals that I put people on
Mhm.
that are crumbling and trying and trying and trying so hard to keep that status with them and just it's not being allowed because my higher self, right? The divine within me doesn't want that for me. But as those pedestals are crumbling, um, we find ourselves in the midst of emotions and upheaval and this transition that we're in. Um, you know, when you said that the guy told you about the jack-o'-lantern or when the guy on Facebook, um, one of the things that has been triggering in me, I'm going to be really authentic here because I definitely can feel myself in the between immaturity and maturity.
Mhm.
And part of my growth is going to come when I can process this part, which is these triggers that I get from Christianity. And one of them has to do with just shooting all over boundaries. I'm sorry, for the curse, but it's like, I know that I lived that way too. I felt that I could proselytize people. I felt that I had the right to tell them where their heart was at. I had the right to tell them what they needed to do to better their spiritual walk. I had the right to judge that person's lifestyle. And I use the term spiritual bypass a lot because as long as I am focused on what everyone else is doing, um, of course, there should be service to humanity. There should be service to community. There should be a part of us that flows out, in my opinion, of the personal path we're taking. And in my opinion, that's secondary. It comes out of the flow of our personal path. We can serve the community, which is what you're doing, right? You couldn't serve in the way you're serving unless you had already walked there personally, right?
For sure.
So it's just it's by default, it's flowing out of you. But in Christianity, I think I came also to a place where I felt like we just trampled all over people's boundaries and their space, their personal space, their spiritual space, their sacred space.
Mm-hmm.
And I was spiritually bypassing my own path.
Mm-hmm.
And now when I see that happen, both to myself and to other people, I want to scream. I want to start telling people to stop doing it, and I want to advocate for those who are being trampled on, whether it be the gays or whoever it is, right? Somebody that's not a Christian. And when I see that uprising, which is happening, people that are speaking out from houses of prayer, I'm not going to mention them, but different places, they grew up under a lot of manipulation and control and power
Mm-hmm.
and lies, just lies. A lot of it was not truth. A lot of control. And now that they're speaking out, it's almost as if when someone who's molested or something, they speak out, and or someone speaks out about their family dynamic that wasn't healthy. It's almost as if they're shunned because they're talking and telling the truth. And
Right.
but it was okay in Christianity to do that to everybody else, to speak out whenever we wanted to speak out. But
Yeah.
now that we're speaking out and just saying we no longer want to judge, we're actually saying we no longer want to live in judgment towards humanity. We don't want to judge others. Um, we're being judged because we don't want to judge anymore.
Well, and this is the time to learn about righteous judgment, because there is such a thing. Righteous judgment to me is what looks at the whole and can discern spiritually what needs to be said. Because if we look at the role model of Christ, he wasn't so nice on the religious.
Ever.
Right. And so a couple of things. Agency, Christians take incredible agency. And I could give a lot of examples, and people, might think, well, what's wrong with that? But, when you go in a restaurant and somebody bows their head to pray, and they're praying for 2 to 3 minutes, and the waitress is standing there waiting, and she's got tables all around and they're busy, I just want to write on a piece of paper the scripture that says, when you pray, go in your closet. Don't pray so that other people can see you. But agency is taken on a multitude of levels. I talk about at a high school graduation class where I think it was my granddaughter that was graduating. And during the course of the keynote, the coach of the high school was giving the keynote, who's this awesome guy, just this motivator, this, he just had a way with the kids and just amazing, the goodness that issued from this guy. And at the very end of his talk, he said, and Jesus Christ saved my soul. And it was like, wow, it's like I just got hit with a brick. And I couldn't believe that he said what he said. because that was incredible agency that was taken in a public setting where there is clearly separation of church and state. Clearly separation of church and state. So I went home and I wrote an article into an editorial opinion piece, and they printed it. And basically what I said was, this guy is incredible. He's, obviously has the heart of the children and works and serves and public servant and everything. And I said, but how would you feel if another keynote speaker got up there and began to speak about Allah?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you wouldn't feel good about it, but you take license because you can and you have. And nobody has taken the time to say, stop it.
I'm laughing because Allah is the same God as the God we worship, but I know what you're saying.
Right. And so the people, they don't see why, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you don't understand. But
Right.
because agency has been taken for so long and boundaries have been
Yes.
crossed and passed and trampled on,
Right.
feel like they can and they can't. And
Right.
more people stand up for, I don't even know, there's probably going to be a new term, but spiritual persecution, or, I don't even know, I'd have to give that some thought. But I think one of the things that's returning to us is we're taking back our critical thinking and we're taking back our agency.
Mm-hmm.
We need to say, wait a minute, you crossed a boundary there. And I hate to think, everybody, in the world of political correctness, nobody can say anything. But you know what? This is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's wrong to do that. And in our nation, just to study, it wasn't founded on Judeo-Christian principles. It was not. It was founded on freedom from the Church of England and its persecution, to come to America and to worship as you will. It was not founded on Christian principles.
Right. But the mindset, the delusion of it, and everything you're saying is the total solar eclipse in Aries that we just had this past April this year. Not only is it healing our core identity and bringing us back to the very essence of who we are, because Aries is the first house, but it is returning proper agency. It's aligning correct agency, because that's where agency comes from, that first house, Aries. And but the thing here is that when we speak out about this, we are persecuting the church now, because everything they did was fine. Everything the church, if they wanted to pray in schools and they wanted the Bibles in schools and all of that stuff, they want to proselytize, if they want to, cross boundaries, it's fine if it's them. But
right.
anyone else, you see, and then the mindset is, when that's brought out into the open, this is not okay. This is not correct. And it really needs to be repented of, whatever that means, whether that means stopping it, turning around and doing the opposite, realizing it's wrong. But we are persecuting the church in this.
Right. And that's something that that may be a little rocky, in the days and weeks and months and years to come, but it is coming.
Yes, it is.
Cannot stop the unfolding of human consciousness, which comes with self-awareness and maturity. You can't stop what's coming. And so, but also it's okay to speak up. It's okay to say, to the Mormons that come to the door, I appreciate, how you feel, but this isn't proper to come onto my property and try to proselytize me. It's okay to say that. It's okay to, taking agency back will be an earmark of this age to come.
Yes, I agree.
The place that we're in, when you talk about boundaries, one of the things that I teach my grandkids and I taught my kids, you don't walk up to a stray dog and put your hand out to pet it. You don't do that. Number one, it's not your dog. You know nothing about that dog, and there is a proper way to approach an animal that you don't know anything about. In the same way, we have to respect boundaries of other people and just not come and throw up all over them
Mhm.
and trespass their boundaries.
Well, I'd like to add to that,
Go ahead.
which I did share a post about, and many people told me, wow, this was a revelation. And I got the revelation in increments after hanging out with people that weren't part of Christianity. And when we were hanging out and doing retreats and just having some time together, um, it didn't take long for a friend of mine who never walked into a church her whole life to say, you and your Christian friends, you trample all over people's sacred space. You
Mhm.
don't lay hands on somebody.
Right,
What if I went and just did energy healing on somebody? Or what if why don't you people ask permission?
right,
This was like, to them, this was literally so common sense and so blatant. And they said, you people pray for people, like crafted prayers in secret for other people without asking their permission.
witchcraft.
Right. And I said, yeah, we do, but like where we just want them to get saved and we just want them to know the love of God and we just know that, they really need all these things we're praying for. And she was like, absolutely not. Isn't that witchcraft? Like, wouldn't you call that the occult?
Right,
And it
right.
was like a light bulb went off. And that's when I began to repent and turn and stop doing that.
Hmm.
And I shared that. And I know that that would be very insulting to intercessors. And I
Hmm.
also see it as a form of spiritual bypass when we are spending so much time, even in secret, because it makes us feel good. We're going to pray for that person. We're going to do instead of taking a look at, why do I feel the need to pray for this person? What is it in my path that I am bypassing in my own shadow? Now
Right,
we're really getting down, right? Why do I feel the need that I must pray these crafted prayers for someone else? In my opinion, whenever I feel the need that I have to do that, or I have to go and say, Jesus saved my soul in public, like there's always an agenda
right,
that could be revealed in my own shadow, in my own spiritual path to be revealed to me. And that's where the real maturity and the real growth takes place, in my opinion, if we're willing to go there, if we're willing to take a look at it.
right,
So I just wanted to mention that about the crafted prayers because it was so blatant to my friends, just about even in a spiritual setting, not to lay hands on somebody unless you say, could I pray for you? Could I lay my hands on you? Could I put my hands here? Could I come into your personal sacred space? And even how can I pray for you? And so again, getting back to all these patterns that we just um, took on as normal and acceptable.
right,
And another word, and I think I mentioned this on our last video, was um, this person said to me, you people think you're superior. I don't know if you see it, but you think that not only you have all these rights, but you also think you're better than everybody else,
right,
and you're not. And coming out of that consciousness, because we know it's a consciousness, right?
right,
Um, And coming out of that resonance or that vibration, in my opinion, is always going to be humbling because you're realizing, oh my God, I wasn't right about everything. Oh my God, I really made mistakes. I trampled on people's boundaries. I, spiritually bypassed. I thought I was better than everybody else and I had the answers for them. And I had to change the world by going to everybody else and telling them what they needed to do. And and that's been part of my path out of it. But I just want to talk a little bit about the sickness of not only the system, but did you notice in your times in church that there were a lot of perhaps sick or unhealthy dynamics that were leaking out of everybody, or trying to show themselves at that time that were ignored.
Oh my gosh, continually. How much time do you have? I mean, that's it was continual. It was continual. And I don't envy church leaders. I mean, they have their own problems, but I mean, these people within within Christian fundamentalism, and I draw the line at trying to address what I was a part of, which is fundamentalism. You know, it's a church full of kooks. I mean, there really is so many dysfunctional people at every level of consciousness. I mean, think about it. And I often think about how could I have been so gullible and naive? And because I consider myself a relatively smart person,
I'm going to get to that.
so entrenched in this, and this will sum it up. Shortly before I had my breakthrough, I said this to God. Oh God, if I am doing anything out of ego, then throw it on the fire as kindling and just get rid of everything where I have not served in love and from a pure heart. Well, that took about 3 weeks. Everything. And, I think about, oh my God, that was nothing but ego.
Wow.
I mean, yes, I loved people and I still do, but oh, yeah.
This was going to be one of my questions for you, because we talk about ego so much. And in fact, I notice if I mention that word to people in Christian fundamentalism, just in authentic conversation, maybe reflecting something back to them, we're so used to talking this way.
Mhm.
It seems so insulting to even say ego, or reflect something about someone's ego to them, because we see it as an enlightenment. Oh my God, yeah, that's ego, right? There's no shame. We all have it. But to be in that Pharisaical construct, and, like Jesus was always pointing out their ego, right? And they were always insulted. And
Well, you can't say the word consciousness either.
correct. It's a curse word too.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, actually, one of my first questions that I had for you was, did you notice as you came out into a newer, higher consciousness, or I know people don't like to use the word higher consciousness, I'll just say different, or an awakened consciousness. What areas of your ego could you share any, but you just did a little bit of, where you saw that operating, but you were blind to it in that construct and in that system of Christianity? And you just said, wow, I was pretty much doing everything out of ego. And I appreciate your admission. I appreciate that humble, confession.
Well,
That's authentic.
you want specifics. I mean, there was just so much. There was just so much, everything. It was like my motivation. And, but in truth, it is very hard to see in the moment, because you are resonating with a system that is built on, I mean, boy, we could talk a lot about this. Let me just say this, and this might kind of launch into something else, but when I coming out of the system and then thinking and perceiving so differently, and feeling like I had somewhat of a handle on, well, geez, they shouldn't shun me. That's not right. That's not Christ-like. And
Right. I want to talk about that.
is it okay to bring it up?
Yeah, I want to talk about it.
Okay. So I was like, why can't they see, my specifically one of my friends that was like a good friend of mine, traveled together, and husbands were, really good friends, if not best friends. She was my best friend for years and years. And, we kind of started going our separate ways when I started pulling out of the church, but we had so much social connection that really wasn't involving the church, traveling to Puerto Vallarta and Cancun and gosh, Egypt and Greece and, Germany. And I mean, we went to so many different places and had a ball.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah. And then, to have her send me a text, which she did apologize for, but she sent me a text and said, I don't want to be your friend anymore. And we were like, I'm more than a decade. I mean, this was really painful. And I just was like, I couldn't believe that she was doing it. Although I saw a pattern in her life where she cut off her mother-in-law once for 5 years over a disagreement, just wouldn't talk to her. And she did that to a cousin of hers who she adored. And she did it to me for like 18 months prior to this. And so I knew that she kind of had that in her wheelhouse of like go-to fixes, is just to cut people off.
Mm-hmm.
But now, the last time she cut me off was 2017, and now it's, 2024. So we're, 7 years in. And I think I told you this too, my grandson committed suicide, and I mean, she was there when my grandkids were, you know what I mean, in our home,
right.
visit,
Family, everything, right?
and not a word, not a card, not a text, not a phone call, nothing. And of course, I didn't feel during the whole process of losing Cody. I felt this in the weeks afterward when I reflected back, and I thought, geez, I didn't even hear from them. And, what kind of a human being does that? And, so I was really hard on Christian fundamentalism. I was hard on it, and I wrote about it on social media, and I wrote about it, and people were like, yeah, they're terrible, and I can't believe it. And so I was getting all this validation, about all treated, which is in itself ego. But
thank you for saying that.
yeah, but I had an aha moment, and it was like 2 weeks ago, if that. And I guess we get these, like this wise little sage that put her hand on my shoulder. And as I was just sitting and really trying to process, because that's really what it is, Dee. It's trying to process things that don't make sense. It's trying to put things in a proper order and perspective instead of just shoving it under the rug. And, I had done this for years and years, trying to figure out, and I had a friend of mine call me and say, well, it's okay if not everybody likes you, right? It's okay if, everybody's not your friend, right? And so I wrote just a couple of weeks ago about, of course, that's okay. If you don't resonate with somebody, of course it's okay not to be their friend. But if you're doing it because you don't agree with their spiritual stance and you're cutting them off because you're being punitive or because you think your God is leading you to do that, well, that's another story.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really okay. And I told my husband, I'm thinking and processing this, and I was really trying to figure out, okay, I'm just going to be really vulnerable here. I keep on dreaming about my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's every night.
I relate.
And I say, I had another dream about so-and-so. I had another dream about so-and-so, and we're hanging out and we're getting along. I had another dream. So it was like, what am I? Because I know that dreams speak to. So I was really trying to figure it out. Why? I'm past this, I'm done thinking about this. I've worked through it. I've written so many articles on, being shunned, and I'm really done with this. Why am I still dreaming about her several times a week, if not
Because,
every night?
do you know why?
I do.
Okay.
So this is the article that I wrote because I had that, and in trying to process this, because my husband would say, well, you've got unfinished work, and a friend said, well, you've got some more things to unpack, and and I'm like, I really have done all that. I just don't understand why she's still in my head. And I thought, maybe she's praying for me, and I can feel it. Or, I mean, I just didn't know. But then that sage came and put her hand on my shoulder and said these words: why do you expect her to be Christ-like when she's not following Christ? Wow. Wow. Because I see the system of Christian fundamentalism as a giant organization that does not follow Christ. They follow another gospel. They follow one that is nationalistic,
Yes.
that is, get a gun and protect yourself. And, I mean, they are following a different gospel. And so when the question came and said, why are you expecting someone to act Christ-like when they're not following Christ?
Mm-hmm.
That closed the book for me. And I haven't had a dream since.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, not about her anyway. So I figured it out and thought, well, okay, this makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Now, that
When,
would definitely seem like a persecution to a Christian to say they're not following Christ. And I just wanted to mention that with Neptune at the last degree of the zodiac in Pisces and Saturn there retrograde, Saturn is really, I mean, this is why people are dreaming so much right now, which is showing us an assistance that we're having to process, like you, right? To get that aha, to get that enlightenment, to get that healing or that, closure that we need. Pisces is the last house, it's the closure. I too am having dreams too. And I received that, what you shared. I kept trying to rationalize it, and I kept saying, okay, the belief system says to love everyone, to accept everyone, to be like Christ, to be like Jesus, go out and just put your arms around everybody and just love everybody. And yet I'm getting treated this way because of whatever, because I might have said that I don't worship Jesus the same way. And how I'm trying to figure it out in my mind. How come they don't love me the same way? How come they can't just still be a friend with me? How come they can't still say, hey, how are the kids doing? Or how come they can't still share other things with me besides the belief system? But I finally saw too, it's an indoctrination, not a belief, because they're not following their beliefs.
right.
If we can't love the gay people, that's just another whole thing that, we could get into because, I don't think Christians would not want anybody putting them on, in front of a microphone to tell everyone what they fantasize about and what their sexual habits are and what they're doing in secret. But why we have a right to judge what everyone else is doing. It's just not correct. It's not right. But where's the love? That's my point. Where are the teachings of Jesus displayed in the actions?
Right.
It's the indoctrinations really that are driving the actions, not the teachings of Jesus. But if we were to say that out loud, it seems like we're persecuting the church, the institutionalized church, because we know that the church is not the people that go into buildings.
Well, and if we're honest, the teachings of Jesus are not being taught. Politics are being taught.
Yes.
There is I going into several funerals over the years, hard to believe that, and someone just asked me this the other day, what is the way? What is this way? I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. And you're not going to get into heaven if you don't, follow the way. And well, what is the way? And so if you ask somebody, any Christian fundamentalist, what that is, chances are they're going to say you need to say the sinner's prayer and you need to accept Jesus into your heart as your personal Lord and Savior and develop a personal relationship and stop sinning. That's not the way, but it's what they think is the way. And so in their church services and even with funerals, they give an altar call. There's so much that they have acquiesced into a system of belief that is not Christ, nor Christ-like. And I think that if they took the red letters, in scripture and taught on that, they'd be way far ahead of the game, But there's such mixture and well, this is that. And, there's just so much that is just plain and simple. It's another gospel. It is. I mean, even coming to the point of, when we talked about prayer, about places, what did Jesus say?
And I think when he was saying to go in secret, I don't think he meant go pray crafted prayers for other people. I think he meant go do your spiritual path in secret.
Right. Right. But it has evolved over the millennia into something that looks like maybe even a shadow of what was intended. I don't think that these people are in a bad place because I know that it serves as an incubator until they are ready to grow. I'm just amazed right now here in Texas, there are these beautiful trumpet vines everywhere. And I've not seen them like this in 30 years of being in Texas. Yeah. And morning glories, they're wild morning glories, and they're violet, and they're all over everything, and they're growing on trees and signposts and all over in these beautiful mounds on the side of the road. We went up to Dallas over the weekend, and I mean, they're everywhere. But what happens with the seed is that condition has to be right. So much rain, and but the conditions have to be right in order for, I mean, the seed was in the ground. It's not like someone came into Texas and just started throwing everywhere. So in the same way, I think that they will mature and they will grow, but the conditions have to be right for their own journey. And we hear, in the teachings of Christ about the 30, the 60, and the 100, that there are the shoots that come up first. And so I think everyone will get there. I think that's the good news.
Yeah.
And part of maturity is coming to a place of understanding that they're okay. And we don't have to proselytize. We may lick our wounds and, bitch a little bit and complain and whatever, but we're awakening even more so too. Different place.
Do you feel that you could be good friends with a Christian that's still a fundamentalist? If they wanted the same thing with you?
Yes. I have tried, and my heart is willing and open and able, but I also understand the law of resonance, and I know human behavior, and it probably just would not be. But I'm open.
Okay.
I also understand that, I wrote this article about your sphere of influence and how we're shedding the things of the past, and that, vibration comes largely from people and in their relationship with you. And, one of the things that happens with the law of resonance is you feel what other people's energy is made of. You feel it's like two spheres overlapping. So you can feel other people's energy in your sphere.
That's true.
And so when you talked earlier about friends and you're just surprised when they, don't want to hang with you or they really don't want to talk with you, it's because there's no resonance. And, um, the article that I wrote said, be willing to move on because that energy of theirs is affecting you in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a tuning fork and I've got one right here. So you have a tuning fork.
Mm.
And if you have another tuning fork and you strike it, it will impact this
That's true.
resonate.
Right.
So you have to be wise with your energy. I always want to love and I always want to be open, but I want to be guided as well. And I want to be sensitive what I feel from others and what is appropriate and necessary and beneficial for both parties. So again, would I? Well, of course.
Okay.
Would it be beneficial? My energy may impact and impede upon them, which would interrupt their own unfolding. I don't want to just say they will negatively impact me. I may negatively impact where they are.
And I love how you're talking about kind of the law of one, the oneness. Uh, I call it the unified field of love, unified field of oneness, because we all do affect one another. And do you believe that moving into the consciousness that you have, you saw things as one?
No, I didn't initially. In fact, when I would hear about the law of one or everybody talking about oneness and this and that and the other thing, it was a load of crap. I used to think that's, not really real. But, the more that I have been in it, the more unity I see in all things. We're all just banging it out here. We're all coming to the place where we're, the cross to me is the intersection of ego and divinity. The egocentric mind, lives on a plane that has to do everything with the self.
Mm-hmm.
And divinity is that intersection where we begin to surrender that life of self to that of something divine.
Yes.
So the cross symbolizes death to the ego. But what I have learned is that stay dead. It resurrects as a servant, as a partner, as a 50% partner with the divine. It's not that this, ego needs to, grovel and, be the servant. It really is a helpmate, and it serves the overall and supports the overall plan of the divine and even becomes that equal partner. And so resurrection, people that teach about the ego having to die and, slay the flesh and, all this other stuff, that's not right. This is a helpmate. This is a wife. What husband would do that to his wife? I mean, that would be horrible and dysfunctional. So we're coming
don't you think that comes out of some of the mindsets? I noticed that too, that I kind of progressed from the Christian fundamentalism to I have to kill my ego to, oh, my ego is actually the pathway. It is the valley of the shadow of death that prepares the place of supping in this feast that comes, right? Uh, as you speak and as people speak, I just see astrology everywhere just because it's a reflection of everything that is back to us. What a beautiful gift, right? In the astrology. And we see crosses, we see axes. And whenever we see an axis or we see a 90-degree angle, which we call a square, which is considered a cross, right? Where it's where there's hard change. So if we see that in a chart going on, we know that there's a hard change. We know that there's a death. We know that there's going to be like a decision now that has to be made, like you talk about. So would you say, in a sense, or in essence, that the ego is kind of our shadow to some degree?
It is, and it is the mechanism that has been installed into humanity because it is the primary mechanism that can focus thought and emotion. Without the ego, we wouldn't be able to focus.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're doing here in banging it out is learning the process of emoting, is learning by what we discern as good or evil or light or dark or desirable or undesirable. We've got all of this plethora of experiences to help teach us how to emote, thereby creating. So this world is malleable and it listens to God, which is here. And whatever we focus on and emote toward, we create. And
Right.
so we may create a little mess over here,
Right. We're
create a little mess over here, and over here. And then one day we go, oh, it's me. I'm the one that's doing this. I need to carefully. I need to really think about this. So the ego is learning through the things that it suffers. It
right.
says Christ that it learns through the things that it suffers. So I love this image of Jesus riding the donkey because it's the ego that bears the weight of divinity in this dimension.
Yes.
And divinity is just goes along for the ride and learns as it has experience and continues on its journey in the physical domains, which it would not have without us.
Right.
Divinity would not have the physical experience without the human.
Mm-hmm.
you know so I just love that the donkey bears, the ego bears the weight of divinity in this dimension.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I so relate to how you see the scriptures, and when I started to see them as all metaphors, and I called it my soul journey. This is my journey. This whole book here is just telling me all about me. I'm everybody in it. I'm every, you know, thing in it. I'm a river. I'm a, like every part of it is me. And when I've, started to get to know, your posts and things, I was like, oh my God, yes, there's, consciousness is opening up to this book that has been called God,
Mhm.
right? The word of God. This is God. You must study this as God. Um, we can speak that on so many different levels of consciousness because it really is, right? It does speak of our path in the divinity that we are,
Mhm.
which is being carried upon humanity or in the body or in this, you know, package that we're in, right? I love how you speak about that because I use different terminology, but one of the things that I see happening is the exposure of toxic shame. And I see a, a mountain or an iceberg of toxic shame buried in humanity that is now being cleared and exposed so that it can clear out of the way. And I know that I held a lot of toxic shame in Christianity and I kept going around in cycles because that perpetuated the cycles of shame.
Mhm.
But just how you say to embrace your ego, we're not looking at it like I have to go beat it and kill it. And it is actually the pathway. And what I'm noticing in my own path and some close people that I talk to, I don't know if it's just that I'm seeing it more because I see it in myself and I'm like, oh my God, that's toxic shame, just totally being, revealed. And it's okay. Like we can love ourselves. It's okay. We are loved and we are love in all of our beautiful messes.
Mhm.
And the more we covered that with toxic shame, the more we ended up going around the same mountain for 40 years in the same cycles. And we call this karma, we call this karmic cycles. And the astrology is actually telling us that right now we are being assisted and offered the opportunities for acceleration to move out of those cyclic patterns. We're actually being assisted in this transition in humanity.
Mm.
So I love how you talk about that with the ego and embracing it as a necessary part of us. Now, I've seen you teach about the ego and talk about the ego being called Satan.
Mm.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, the primary scripture is in identifying the aspects of who we are, because I believe that the disciples, the 12 disciples, are actually aspects, the zodiac of who we are. And when Christ went to go gather them and to bring them into the upper room, he was congealing a consciousness that was holistic.
Mm-hmm.
But in that process, when Christ is talking to his disciples, again, we see these as external entities, but they really are internal archetypes of the
Yes.
soul. And so, he says to them, again, all the aspects of itself, who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am? And so they, here starts this great conversation. And
I love where you're going.
some say, John the Baptist, and some say, and then all of a sudden Peter, pipes up and says, I say that you're the Christ. And he says, flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. First of all, where's heaven?
Mm-hmm.
In here. Flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you. In other words, nobody spoke it to you. No one
Right.
told you to say, hey, tell him, he's the Christ. Flesh and blood. So Peter represents to us that aspect of our multidimensional self that can discern and hear its intuitive voice.
Yes.
The Father within can say, so when we have a thought, oh my gosh, he's the Christ. Well, that's your intuitive faculty. So Peter represents, Simon at that time represents, and this is what Simon means. It means hearing. Hearing. That's what the word Simon means. So he says to Simon, hearing, you have heard well. For flesh and blood did not reveal this to you. Therefore, I'm going to name you Peter, which means rock, revelation, revelator, that aspect of us that can hear intuitively, that can hear by the Spirit, that has discernment. And then just a couple verses later, Jesus says, now I'm going to have to go in, and then this is going to happen, and I'm going to have to die and suffer. And Peter, the revelator, now says, no way, that's not going to happen to you. Of course not. You'll be all right, bro. You'll be all right.
I'll cut off some ears.
Yeah.
There you go.
And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. For you are not mindful of the things of the Father, but of the things of men. So in that scripture, he's identifying the ability to hear intuitively by spirit or by your ego.
And he manifested that when he manifested it in 3D or in the story by cutting off an ear when he was trying to actually manifest the fact that he would protect Christ from being killed.
Right. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's crazy. So yes, so we don't understand who and what Satan is. There is an excellent book called The Third Millennium. You've heard me talk about it, by Ken Carey. The Third Millennium by Ken Carey. You can look it up on Amazon. and go to chapter 4. Chapter 4 talks about who and what Satan is, and it will change your world.
Okay.
Understand that Satan is actually the world that is created when we emote and have influence of the ego.
I agree. But I'm
It's
sure I have a lot of enlightenment to learn.
it is chapter 4 will flat out mash your potatoes when it comes to thinking about who and what Satan is. But
Okay.
this, that within fundamentalism, I teach just a little bit on the egregore.
Right.
The egregore is an entity that is created by worship, ritual, and thought and focus. We
Okay.
create because this is the creative impetus of the universe.
Yes.
And so we create this thought form entity that is not in keeping with the gospel that is presented in scripture. So we follow this egregorical understanding of who and what Satan is as outside of us. Remember when I had this talk with a friend of mine who said to me, you can't say
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Satan, because I've stood toe to toe. You can't say there's
And I relate, myself and many people that I know. I see what she's saying
yeah,
because we warred for years against Satan, and many still are. There's
yes.
got to be an enemy out there.
And it worked because we're in a system, we're in a sphere of influence that has these gods, that has this understanding. And so it's limited, but it's a system that we can be a part of it or not. That's why now when people say, well, you were a deliverance minister, you healed people, you cast demons out of people, and so on and so forth. What do you do now? I've exited the system. I don't even mess with it. Why should I when it doesn't exist out of the system? Now I can step back in if I want to, but who would want to?
Do you feel you have a whole lot less fear
Oh my gosh,
than
yes.
when you fed that system of an
Yes,
outside enemy?
yes, because there was an enemy that we created. When you're outside of the system, you're not there anymore.
Revelation.
I know. So, yes. So, when you look at Satan as the adversary to spirit that's
That's
internal,
good. That's good. That's good.
and what I said to my friend when she said, you can't say there's no devil because I've stood toe to toe. You can't say there's no hell because I've been there. And I said to her, these things will appear externally from you as long as you need them to, but they are not external. They are internal constructs of human consciousness that has been extroverted in the world so that the ego can learn by it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, when you look at it in those terms, it's like so simple rather
I
than
know.
war against an entity that is continually fighting God, who's supposed to be all powerful. But how often people, are dying at the hands of this Satan? Ugh. No, no, ma'am. All done. I don't want to be there anymore.
Why is Lucifer and Christ both called the morning star? And by the way, Venus is also called the morning star, to drop in some astrology.
So when you look at the scriptures, incredible latitude has been given to the doctrine that Lucifer is the devil. Lucifer is the morning star. It's us before we took the dive into a purposeful devolution into the physical world. The lamb slain before the foundation, that is the eternal Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Who went through this devolution into the physical domain, picking up a body that was congealed with thought and intention to have a physical experience. That's Lucifer is us. but we
Yeah.
have made it into a worship leader who's got musical instruments,
Yeah.
but it's our state. And again, from what I can remember, and I studied this, and I have a paper that I can send to people that want it, but I had a man teach in my home and say, for those that believe Satan and Lucifer are one and the same, I'm here to tell you they're not. Don't believe. Study for yourself. I'll send you the scriptures. And so he did send me the scriptures. I did study, and I realized he's right.
Mm.
Tremendous latitude and error has been mixed into a doctrine that for those that embrace it and believe it, it's dogma because they haven't questioned the validity of the thought. And it's not true.
I think that as we become aware of what these scriptures really mean, any entity in that system is going to scream blasphemer. Just the things we're talking about right now, that egregore would scream at us, blaspheme. You're blaspheming. To call Christ Lucifer, how dare you? Right?
Well,
Call
it is the entity. It is. So Lucifer was never a noun.
and we know it means light.
Luciferus. And for some reason, this doctrine, all of a sudden, it became an entity.
Okay.
That was named Lucifer. And in the study that I did, there was no Lucifer. It was Luciferus. And that comes from the same word as phosphorus, or parts of it, that lets us know that it's something that shines, that has
Makes
light.
sense. Makes sense.
Oh, yes, there was no such being as Lucifer. It was Luciferus, but shortened to fit a well-crafted doctrine that is simple.
Okay. I'm going to ask the question, and I know at this point for me, it doesn't matter anymore where it did in the past. Was Jesus, did he really walk the earth? Or did he not? Is it just metaphorical, deeper message that was sent to humanity? Is it a coded book? What would you speak to that? Does it not matter to you?
No, no, it doesn't. There's a scripture that says, for those that say that Christ has not now come in the flesh, that same is Antichrist. And my answer to that is in studying that scripture. For those that say Christ has not now come in the flesh, that same is Antichrist. And so I say to them, are you saying that you are not Christ come in the flesh?
Right.
And
they would say no, wouldn't they?
Of course. And then I say, well, that's Antichrist, isn't it? Because when you look at the original language, is not now come. For those that say Christ is not now come in the flesh, it is speaking in a present tense. And in Matthew, it also says, for those that say, come over here, see the Christ, he's over here, or go over there, he's over there, do not believe them.
Yep.
It's because it's an internal construct.
Right.
That's continuing to develop and unfold. So I don't know what I think about an actual coming. I know that I am not threatened by hell or unbelief, so that I am free to think critically. I know what is written and is said, that there is no documentation outside of the Bible at that time. I know that the Roman Catholic Church was incredibly controlling.
And
So
still is.
at the end of the day, I have to take the words and what they do to me and mean to me.
Mm,
I am birthing through the virgin soil of humanity as I am birthing Christ, which is an amalgamation of the divine and man
mm.
in one body. And it's a new creation that is housing spirit and matter.
Do you think that's why they use the two terms, Son of Man and Son of God?
Absolutely. Because one is speaking to the man while he slumbers
Mm-hmm.
beneath the
Yes.
blankets of divinity, and the other one is the awakened divinity within man. So,
Yes.
and I also think that, and I don't know if you saw my message, but I have to leave at 4:45.
Yes, I did. I saw your message.
So, well, I forgot where I was going. Doggone it.
The Christ, you would say to the person, are you not the word made flesh, the Christ, well, I have a couple of other questions then before we have to head out. Why is consciousness so mysterious, so mystical? Why is it so hard to explain, say, when I'm on this level of consciousness and someone else is there? How come I can't cross the dimensions, so to speak, and reach?
You
And
know,
do you, and do you, and do you think that as we move more into this age of Aquarius, um, things will unfold where there will be ways to articulate that's going to materialize
oh yeah,
easier. Yeah, I do too.
absolutely.
It
There will be,
sounds like you're speaking another language to certain people, and they almost think that you're being uh condescending, or I've heard people say that to me, like, what are you even saying here? What are you trying to say here on Facebook? It's ridiculous. Like, it doesn't even make any sense.
well, to them, and that's okay. If I were to listen to a computer programmer, someone who wrote code, I wouldn't know what the hell he was saying either. But that's not a bad thing, because I don't have to learn that. These things that we're learning by spirit. And the language center is really just a tool, you know. That's why, I say that we are learning, but we're not learning via the intellect. Because
I'm Go
that's
ahead.
that's the left half of the brain,
Right.
which is beginning to yield to the right half. And that's another mystery when Jesus said, as lightning strikes from the east to the west, you'll see the Son of Man coming in.
Ah, it's good
And
stuff.
to me, that's the right side of the brain. That is Simon turning into Peter. It's the intuitive that can hear
Yes.
without being taught through the
Mhm.
intellect. And so it is when inspiration is initiated in the right side of the brain, but then enlists the intellect as a servant, is when things really get cool. Right
Wow.
now, humanity enlists the intellect, and every now and then will, come to the intuitive, but mainly it's been the opposite. And so, yes, that lightning striking is when the intuitive mind is inspired by something that is not apprehended by the five senses.
Yes. And I'm just sent I'm in whatever groups that I tap into. I just keep hearing the same theme over and over and over again. And people that hear from the angels and channel different, source from how they hear source, right? Are saying we're moving into an age where we will intuit, we will know by knowing rather than by intellect. And even in astrology, every sign, every house has a phrase that governs it, so to speak. Whereas, like, the first house, Aries, is I am, right? That's the I am. And the next house, Taurus, is I have, and so on and so forth. And coming out of the age of Pisces, which is I believe, all these beliefs, are crumbling. and moving to the age of Aquarius, which is, I know, it's a knowing. Isn't that
Yes.
incredible? I just know I have this like the Bible does say, you don't need anyone to teach you beliefs anymore. You will know because this anointing is in you.
I remembered what I was going to say.
Okay.
Doesn't necessarily fit right along here. We're going to have to challenge our use and definition of God, because that brings with it a whole different construct. And consciousness simply means what you are aware of.
Right.
That's all it means. Consciousness means what the human is aware of. And so we are aware of a construct called God.
Hmm.
And in the Bible, the name of this essence was not definable with a word.
Mm-hmm.
And it was inutterable.
Unnameable.
And I know that in German, God, good, is a
Mm-hmm.
word for good.
Right.
Good is a word for good. And so, along with that word comes a very broad misunderstanding of what it is. So, we're going to have to begin to start challenging ourselves. It was Des Walter, and this is what I was going to say. Des Walter, a wonderful teacher, came to my home on several occasions and taught people. And when he would speak, I would say, well, geez, Des, that's like this scripture, or that's like this word. And I would always use my religious acumen
Mm.
and my religious words, my religious training. And finally, he said, Barbara, I was like, uh-oh, you have to stop, because this language will draw their consciousness to a closed point, into a closed system. I am trying to get them to stop using that language.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, ooh, I just got spanked.
Yeah. A
By the
little prick of the ego, that's all.
But I realized that what he was doing was trying to get people to come out of their programming, because a word will produce a doctrine, a
Yes.
sphere of influence that is not accurate to where we're going. And I think the next word to experience a recalibration is the word God,
I agree.
because it is not valid.
Right. And we've never been here before, therefore we don't know how that's going to open
Exactly.
to
But
humanity.
the only thing that is necessary is a willingness to learn.
Yes. Humility.
Yes.
Do you have to go or do you have 3 more minutes?
I have 3 more minutes.
Okay, great. Um, well, one other thing I was going to say is I started to realize that if I put the word consciousness or awareness wherever it says faith, it it was true. Like it matched. It worked for me. You know, if when the Son of Man comes, if he doesn't find conscious awareness, you know, and because being aware is being aware of what we cannot see, right? The ego can only look at all of the 3D, but consciousness looks beyond that. It can see it intuitively without trying. Um, what else did I want to ask you? I had so many other questions, but we'll have to save that for another time. Yeah, about incarnations and things like that. That's another whole video, so I'm gonna probably stop there because we could talk about a lot of things. And other than love and non-judgment, what would you say have been the greatest gifts of just being able to come through as a pioneer and to move through where you are and the maturity that you talk about? Is there anything of the other fruits that you are noticing
it is an absence of fear is key, because the absence of fear will automatically bump up your vibe. And when you experience an escalation in your own personal vibe or frequency, then other chapters become available to you because the keys are all in frequency.
Yes.
So if I am at a certain level of frequency, when my personal vibe begins to escalate, then all of a sudden, different information begins to open to me, because now I have the vibrational key.
Yes.
I can
Yes.
access a different room because I have a different key.
It's energetic.
It is so overcoming fear, and fear is it is so multifaceted. But for
Oh, I know.
loss of relationship and loss of status and loss of just blah blah blah, just all of that. And when you get past that threshold, then a whole new vista opens up. So for me, fear was a biggie. But I see it manifesting in so many interesting ways that the Barbara of old could not stand under the weight of such pressure to perform, to be, to do. And now in this place where fear kind of sloughs off of us like a smelly garment, then just a very wide panorama begins to open. And so that is what I would say has been, if that answers your question, one of the key things for me to move forward in my walk and to begin to apprehend more.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I can feel the atmosphere being just with you online is I can feel the transformation in you just since the last time that we did this online, since the last time I saw you in person. And it is beautiful. It is felt intuitively, it is felt energetically, and it is changing me. And I believe that's how we change the atmosphere, not by all the other things we talked about and learned, but by walking out our own path, like you talk about.
We're
And
helping one another for sure.
that's it. And I believe the Aquarian age is going to be, um, there are no gurus. There are no, people at the pulpit, some up here, like there's no more of this. We are as the collective
Mm-hmm.
standing shoulder to shoulder. We're going together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's no hierarchy,
Yes.
this
No
is the
crumbling.
one, this is the one.
Yes. The one, capital O.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I just appreciate the time together, Barb. I love you. I appreciate you, and I know so many do. And I just want to thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. I love you, Dee.
Till next time,
Sounds good.
people can find you on Facebook and just Barbara Simon, Symon. No S on the end, correct?
Here's an S on the end,
Oh,
Symons.
there is Symons. I'm sorry. So it's Barbara Symons. Love you, Barb.
Love you too. Say hi to Scott.
Thank you. And hi to Lyle.